What was Tennessee's worst collapse in their athletic history? Now, what the H? Why is Caleb Calhoun asking me that question? Well, there happens to be a tie-in. So give us a quick synopsis of what happened with the Denver Nuggets.
The Denver Nuggets, I was ready to proclaim Nikola Jokic the greatest white player in NBA history, even surpassing Larry Bird. Because three-time MVP, should have won it last year, should have been four-time MVP, was ready to go win his second title, and just collapsed against the Timberwolves. After falling behind 2-0 at home, won 2 on the road, then built a 3-2 lead, then lost by 45 in Game 6, but no matter, they're returning home from Game 7, and they got a 20-point lead against the Timberwolves team led by a 23-year-old Anthony Edwards, and they choke. And they lose in 7 games. And Nikola Jokic totally let me down. I am not now ready to proclaim him the greatest white player of all time. I cannot call him a top 2 center of all time like I was ready to do. So it got me thinking, what are the biggest choke jobs in Tennessee history? Now, when I think choke jobs, I think of 2 things. I don't just think of games that they lost that they should have won, but I think of how costly those losses were in terms of their goals for the season. And Tennessee got a lot of them. And yeah, I am eating so much crow today. I decided, you know what? I'm going to take my anger out on just humiliating other people, which is historic Tennessee sports teams.
There you go. All right. Well, we'll do that. I want to do that, and I want to get into that. But Larry Bird's the best white player ever. Nevertheless, you're going to have a very difficult time talking me out of 2001 LSU, the SEC championship game, as being the biggest choke job in history. And I don't even think you're going to argue that that is the biggest one. But there are 3 others from football that happened earlier before that 2001 that you wanted to point out. 99 Arkansas, 31 Kentucky, and 69 Ole Miss.
Yeah, so I wanted to start with football. So 1999 Arkansas, people forget this. The week of the Arkansas game, despite having lost to Florida earlier in the year and not being likely to win the SEC title, Tennessee made it back up to number 2 in the BCS, ahead of undefeated Virginia Tech. So Tennessee was going to the BCS national championship game if they won out. They lost a road game to the Arkansas Razorbacks. Yes, that's right. They lost a road game to Arkansas, one they never should have lost. I wanted to go through history in 1931 Kentucky. For those who don't know, in 1931, Tennessee was 9-0. They were in the midst of like a 5-year undefeated streak with Neyland. Not 5-year winning all games. They had some ties in there, but they hadn't had a loss. They played Kentucky for a chance to go to their first Rose Bowl ever, a bad Kentucky team, and they tied Kentucky 6-6. That absolutely wrecked them. And then 1969 Ole Miss, Dave, that was the Archie Who game. Tennessee is going to play Ole Miss. They are number 3 undefeated. If they win, they're definitely going to be number 1 and go play for the national title and go be declared national champions. And Steve Kiner says we might as well be playing a bunch of mules in Ole Miss, and they say Archie Who, and Archie leads Ole Miss to a 31-0 win over Tennessee. And yes, I didn't mention this in the email. It was an oversight by my end. I knew it, but I forgot to write it out. 2022 South Carolina. Tennessee's going to the college football playoff if they win that game. Tennessee's up by 21. Tennessee's favored by 21. I'm meeting with Dave on Friday, and I'm saying, you know what? Does South Carolina have a defense? Well, it turns out they didn't have a defense, but the problem was Tennessee had less of a defense, and Spencer Rattler dropped 63 points.
I almost take that in a totally different category. Like it was a collapse, but to me, it's like a travesty that you had a linebacker pitch a fit early in the week, and you had a quarterback suffer an ACL injury. So to me, that's kind of a different category, but it was a collapse. You need to show up and win that game. I don't care if your backup quarterback's playing or who's playing. You got to go out and win that game. There's too much on it. Now, there's been a couple that I've covered in the Sweet 16 in 2000 and 2007. One was against a really, really good team that surprised a lot of people, but Tennessee has definitely stumbled in men's basketball as well.
Yes, quite a few times, actually. So the 2000 Sweet 16 game, there was just no excuse. Tennessee was a 4 seed. The top 3 seeds all ahead of them lost. They're in the Sweet 16 playing 8th seed in North Carolina. This is not your father's or your son's North Carolina. This is post Dean Smith, pre Roy Williams. Okay, a bad North Carolina team. Tennessee's up by 9 with 10 minutes to go in the second half. And you brought up how they bring in Julius Peppers to just out rebound them all the time. And also Jerry Green decides, hey, let's jack up a bunch of threes with 25 seconds left on the shot clock every time we had the ball on offense. And Tennessee blows that game, blows a chance at the Final Four. 2007, they were not the better team than Ohio State, but they had built a 20-point lead. You got to hold that lead. And they blow that lead and lose, and that was a chance to go to their first Elite Eight. Another men's basketball one was 2018, the Sister Jean Loyola Chicago game, which everybody in Knoxville just can't stand Sister Jean. I feel like even Knoxville Catholic kids decided to convert to Protestant after that. Okay,
why do they hate Sister Jean?
Because Tennessee should have beaten Loyola Chicago. They blew that game. They lost on a last-second shot to an 11-seed Loyola Chicago. And the path was clear to a Final Four run. Everybody in the next rounds was going to be a lower seed. Tennessee had a clear path to the Final Four, but couldn't get past 11-seed Loyola Chicago, who made the Final Four run. That was probably Barnes' worst choke job. You could argue 2022 Michigan. You could argue 2019 Purdue. But 2018, Sister Jean, Loyola Chicago, should not have happened. That just was an embarrassment.
We can't hate a none. We can't hate a none. There's some more collapses brought to you by our good buddy Don Self at State Farm right there in Collegedale and Ottawa, and he will take care of you. Customer service. There'll be no collapse when you need your claim because he will take care of you. Everybody wants to save money, and I get that, shopping prices, but go to donself.net right below donself.net. And you can call him at 423-396-2126, 423-396-2126. Now, you got a couple of the spring sports in there. You have the 2007 Softball College World Series. I'm assuming that was the year of the Monica Abbott, right?
Monica Abbott's pitching a perfect tournament. I'm gonna
depart from you here in just a little bit. I did not think that year, and I actually got into that team, that they were the best team in the College World Series.
No, Arizona had better run support. But you would have thought Monica was pitching such a perfect series. She pitched a perfect first game, pitched a no-hit shutout, threw like 3 extra innings in the second game. All Tennessee has to do is score 1 run. 1 run, and they win the game. And they couldn't buy 1 run. That's why it was a choke. And the other spring sport, the 2022 NCAA baseball tournament, best team, number 1 throughout the year, talking so much trash, the bat flips and everything like that. And then they lose the super regional to Notre Dame, don't even get to the College World Series. And then we got to talk about 1999 women's basketball. 1997-98 Lady Vols is the greatest team of all time. Samika Randall, Tamika Catching, Samika Holtzclaw. They go undefeated. They win the national title. Everybody is back next year. It's Shamika Holtzclaw's senior year. They're in the Elite Eight. And this was the biggest reason I had to put Candace Parker ahead of Shamika Holtzclaw on my all-time list. Shamika Holtzclaw has her worst shooting performance at Tennessee in that 1999 Elite Eight as Tennessee loses to Duke. It was the ultimate choke job. The Lady Vols never should have lost that game. In terms of talent disparity chokes, that's probably the biggest. But because of the importance of the sport, I can't ignore 2001 LSU. 2001 LSU was just an absolute travesty.
Yep. It's tough to top that one. And I'm curious if really don't think there's any common thread among all those collapses, except they were wearing orange. And I bet if you went down any other college athletic department, you could find similar collapses, right? I don't think this is an inordinate amount of collapses when we're talking about over the past 50 years in all 4 of the major sports.
No, and to be fair, at different times, I'm sure
they just hurt. That 2001 game still hurts. I would have been in LA for 4 days. Go ahead.
Yeah. Well, the 2001 game it's actually kind of the reverse of the 2023 South Carolina game, because the 2001 game, Tennessee lost because LSU's quarterback got hurt. And John Chavis didn't know how to adjust in a game for a backup quarterback. Whereas they lost the 2022 game because Hendon Hooker got hurt, which, I just want to stick on that for a second, Dave. Maybe I'm crazy, but I know they were only down 49. I know they were down by 3 scores in the fourth quarter. But didn't you feel that if Hendon Hooker had stayed healthy, they still would have come back and won that game?
I thought that it was very doable. I thought they were not out of it whatsoever. I've heard a couple of people say they are going to come back and win. I'm not going that I would predict it, but I would call it a 50-50 shot, which if you looked at the score, should be what? 80-20 that you're not going to come back. So, yeah, I felt like they could come back. I felt like they played flat. I felt like it's a team that has shown they can put a bad half behind them. They can also put a good half behind them, for that matter. So, yeah, I don't. When I look at the greatest collapses, I have trouble with Monica Abbott. I have trouble with that North Carolina team because I don't even think that they know. They knew that they had Julius Peppers coming off the bench. Remember, Brandon Hayward got hurt. So, to me, the biggest one would still have to be 2001 LSU in football. I'm having trouble coming up with a close second other than perhaps the North Carolina game. Now, in all reality, a couple of these come before I was alive. So, but I will say that North Carolina game being in person, Caleb, that it felt like Tennessee had that one. And Brendan Hayward got in foul trouble, and he ended up being a good NBA player. It's not like they were better without him, but Julius Peppers was a much tougher matchup, and they just could not handle that.
Yeah, that was. I mean, I understood why they couldn't handle the Julius Peppers matchup. I think the problem was if Tennessee has a competent coach at that time, they're running their offense and they're not relying on the 3-point shot constantly at the end. That's why Julius Peppers got so many rebounds because they kept missing threes.
Long rebounds, too. As a matter of fact, I can visualize him catching those 10, 12-foot rebounds that come off long shots. So, yeah, he was all over the court. And, man, he was one of the most impressive athletes I've ever seen in person. I will say that.